At any rate, I want to welcome you to, this is the Newcomers to Machine Learning stream with ACE, and an event that's brought to you for free by Aggregate Intellect's Socratic Circles, or ACE as we call it for short. I recognize some faces out there, so I know that some people are familiar with ACE, a community of machine learning practitioners and researchers gathered around topics in AI research, engineering, and products. And I think we're going to have a fun technical conversation tonight. We have 3 to 5 events like this a week that are available for free. And we also produce premium content in some other areas as well. So I just want to encourage you guys before I get started to, if you haven't created a login on our website, ai.science, to do so, and also to follow us on LinkedIn and follow us on YouTube, where we have a channel called ML Papers Explained. And all of those channels will let you know what is happening next here. This particular stream that is for people who are just getting involved in machine learning, we have events that take place about once a month. And our topic for tonight is essentially MLOps and productionizing machine learning. And depending on people's backgrounds, I know that for me, and some people I know in the room here, my background in machine learning was through a boot camp, and they basically teach you the math. They teach you roughly how things work. They don't teach you how to they teach you how to, if you're like me, build a recommender system in your mother's basement, but they won't tell you how to set that up so that millions of users could be benefiting from it. And that's what MLOps is all about. And I have 2 very knowledgeable speakers who are going to speak with us about it. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask each of my 2 guests to introduce themselves, actually. Tell us a bit about yourselves and a bit about your relationship to MLOps. Fatin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. My name is Fatin Hawk, and I currently work out at Lookout Security, doing machine learning engineering, as well as like data science and you know, a little bit of DevOps, a little bit of everything, because I'm pretty much the only ML engineer in the company, and my focus is on cybersecurity, mobile cybersecurity, and previous to that, I was a web developer doing front end work. And previous to that, I was doing research in quantum computing, and my background is in mechatronics engineering. So different kind of fields that I've been in, touch my toes in. And yeah, I also love to salsa dance and rock climb. So if anyone's interested in that too, we could talk about that. And in terms of my relationship to MLOps, yeah, so because I touched all these kind of different fields and I had to figure out how to productionize models, I ran into a lot of different challenges. And based off of that, I've gained a lot of knowledge. And also in my previous company, I worked as a web development consultant. And from there, I also gained some experience in terms of understanding a little bit about the business side as well, and the connection between the business part and the engineering part. So I think that's where my experience lies. And yeah, a lot of, I just think it's a lot of experience rather than any sort of courses I took.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Xiang, how about you?
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Xiang. I am currently the CTO of Aggregate Intellect. So we are essentially the reason is you guys are here today is because it's a community backed by Aggregate Intellect, the company. So it's we have a vibrant community in here. So a little about me myself. I previously was working in different various roles, but mostly in the software. I worked as software developer, engineer, and then solution architect. Then I transitioned to machine learning in around 2018. And since previously I was mostly working in consulting companies. So my exposure to machine ML ops, or some people like call AI ops these days, is essentially through at the very beginning, because I was working as a consultant, so I was forced to learn all these like DevOps principles. So that's one part. Then from there, naturally, if you're working with some projects on machine learning, then you kind of get into all the productionizing and all the scaling part of it. And currently, we also have some machine learning projects in the pipeline. So I'm keeping an eye on what's the latest, essentially. So those are like I got exposed to MLOps in bits and pieces from those different experiences.
Okay, that makes sense. So I wanted to ask each of you a question. Given that you've worked in different roles and having done some consulting, I think for a lot of people in the room who are emerging in their careers, it might be useful for them to get a sense in an environment where MLOps has been adopted. What are some of the different types of roles that people could end up doing? Maybe I'll ask you, Fatin, to start.
Sure. By the way, fun fact, Jiang was my first mentor in ML, so that's there's a connection there. Anyway, so what are some of the roles? So I think it's really important to consider what is DevOps. It's like, I want to kind of clarify that, and that kind of helps understand what types of roles and how they're connected. So DevOps is about the idea of being able to connect the engineering part with the business value that you're trying to create, right? So it's being able to educate. It's part of it is educating the organization to be able to figure out ways of deploying quality products or services in a consistent way and with high quality, and to be able to fix any sort of issues with your software relatively quickly, right? And that's not just an engineering problem, it's also a business problem where business has to understand that by ensuring that the engineering is really good and that the quality of the software coming out is really of high quality, that it's going to help business and solve business problems. And sometimes that requires educating the business people, and sometimes it requires educating the engineering people. So there's a lot of soft skills to doing DevOps. So then how is that connected to the MLOps portion? So the MLOps portion is saying, okay, well, we know that the DevOps is about releasing high quality software. So MLOps is more about releasing high quality like models, high quality in the sense that you can track it, you can trace it, you can reliably say where that model comes from and things like that. So so in software, we know that we have version control, we have things like automated testing. So all those things also apply to models. How do you automatically test them, or how do you ensure that you can test them and know that they're high quality? So just like there's a relationship between business and engineering, in MLOps, there's also additional relationships between data scientists, machine learning engineers, data engineers, data analysts. So they all have to somehow talk to one another, as well as they have to be able to talk to the business side as well. So like, for example, a data scientist might not know what is proper software implementations of their models, right? So if you're doing any sort of pre-processing step and things like that, how do you know that this is good code, and how do you package it in the proper way? And so sometimes an ML engineer would have to step in and be able to educate a data scientist to figure out how to package that model in a high quality way and in a testable way. An ML engineer needs to know a little bit about the data science to be able to bridge that gap between high quality software and data science. And then And then, they both also have to interact with the business people to be able to say, hey, are the things that we're working on valuable to the business side? So there's a lot of different interactions that happen, and it's a lot to do with communication, as I would say, regardless of what role you play.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Xiang, do you have anything that you want to add?
Sorry, I don't want to lose track. I just make sure I didn't lose track of your original questions. Could you repeat your original
Oh,
question?
absolutely. Yeah, we're talking about the breadth of roles, different roles within an MLOps framework.
Okay. Different roles within. Okay. So, first of all, I think there are different ways of describing this. I'll probably complement Fatin's answer. Fatin mentioned DevOps, data science, and software engineer. So if you draw a Venn diagram of the three, and then somewhere in the middle is someone that has both DevOps, data science, and some software engineering skills. So my perception of DevOps is someone who have skills in somewhat in all three areas, but leaning on the DevOps side. I guess that's probably another way of describing it. And also depending on whether you are talking about if you're working on a small team or big team, how big your project is, there could even like be more specialized or more specialized roles. There's also this role called ML platform engineer, which probably could exist in bigger companies, which takes even higher level roles, and they are responsible for, in addition, I guess in addition to DevOps, ML ops, they are responsible for more roles. So in terms of what the responsibility of ML ops engineer, I could throw in a few, I guess, a few terms, like these are things that come to my mind. I think one thing is you're solving the scalability problem of the project, of your pipeline, machine learning pipeline, and then there's the traceability, which which Fatin has just mentioned, and then there's the reproducibility, and finally security. Also, that's also something you need to take care of. So yeah, I think like on the first, like off the top of my head, I think those are the things that I could describe, like what are the scope of what a ML ops engineer is responsible for.
Okay, that's great. I want to ask you guys sort of the opposite question, in the sense that MLOps is a growing field. It probably hasn't been as robust as it's becoming now. So what are some of the bad things that can happen if you don't have anything in place? And if either of you have any horror stories you can share, or just a general sense of what are the risks?
You want to go first? Or?
Sure.
Jiang?
Sure, I can go. Sure, I can go. Like some. So the question is, if the ML ops process is not in place, so what could go horribly wrong? A few things, like say if there's no scalability, in the sense that if you're talking about single machine serving single model, and if you really hit a point where like requests start coming in very very constantly, so your user base is growing rapidly, and then you can get a saturation of that server very quickly, and then resulting in basically not anyone would be served in that scenario, and then resulting in very bad user experience. And more severe things could be server crashes. If there's no good restart mechanism, it could crash. And then there are probably security risk. Maybe your security is too loose, and then without having a rigid process of thinking about it, then it could be taken advantage of by hackers and bots. And believe me, they're everywhere on the internet, like looking for opportunities these days. Yeah. So, and also and maybe you are not able to reproduce, like you had something that was working, but because there's no versioning, proper versioning, and you can't restore it to a state where it's working, and your stakeholder is breathing down your neck, but you're like, oh, I lost it for some reason. That could happen. So that, yeah, those are a few things that's off the top of my head.
Right. Yeah, I agree to those things, and I kind of ran into some of those issues myself, where, thinking about how to reproduce something or repeatability, like how do you ensure, like, for example, when you get new data, that like you can track which data you trained it on, right? The model on, and when you train the model, what was the original code that you trained the model on? And so those things creep up all the time. And being able to track that is really important, and also being able to monitor things is really important. Now, but like going back to like what is, what can go wrong, I think it's a really open-ended question, because like it really depends on like what scenario or what the context is, because there are times where actually doing MLOps is the wrong thing, or like doing too much MLOps is the wrong thing. So for example, if you're a startup, like, maybe when you're doing, if your only goal is to deploy a single model and just to test it out or prototype it, then having, processes in place where and tooling in place that are very sophisticated might not benefit you, because you need to get something out the door, right? So sometimes what you need to think of when you do MLOps is like, how much do you need to buy into things? Like do you need to version your data? Like, is that necessary right now? Or can we just download the data onto an S3 bucket or something like that, or somewhere, and then just like have an address to save, like in your configuration file. Like, you really have to think about like if your company requires you to get something out the door quickly, sometimes you're not going to be able to do all the tooling that's needed to be able to make things repeatable and things like that. So, but if, vice versa, if you, or like on, the opposite end spectrum is, if you're working in a bank or a healthcare system, then there's some things you might emphasize in MLOps. For example, you might want to emphasize the repeatability and the traceability, because, there's patients' lives in line. Or, if you're dealing with an insurance company and you're developing a model to calculate insurance premiums, then you might really care about tracing back how the model was trained and everything like that. And that's more important than the performance of the model, maybe. So you really need to figure out how much you need to buy into MLOps, like what parts of it. And to do that, you have to really understand the business problem, and you have to really understand what you're trying to solve and what's like mission critical to that, right? So if you're working at an insurance company, it might be the reliability. If you're working on developing a model for like a social network where there's, tens of millions of users, then maybe performance is the issue that you have to worry about, and you have to monitor your endpoint, your deployed model. So it really depends on your situation. And so I don't want you to think of like MLOps as like you need to really have all these things down your pipe. You need to automate everything off the get-go. You don't need to do that. The focus should be on, first of all, educating your entire company and your team to work in a way synergistically between the engineering side and the business side, and then really one thing at a time, first add a little bit of value, get a model out there, and then figure out how to automate some things, right? Like figure out what needs to be fixed or improved on. So think of MLOps as something where you're constantly trying to improve on things, right? So if it takes 2 days to get your model out in the real world, and that's causing you problems in terms of like learning more about how your customers behave with that model, then maybe you might want to improve the speed at which you're deploying that model, right? But if it's not an issue, then don't worry about fixing it, right? So it really depends on like what the problems are.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I think context is king for sure. I want to switch gears for a sec before giving people a chance to ask you guys some questions personally, and just talk for a minute about aggregate intellect and your involvement with ACE and what you've gotten out of it. And do you recommend that people in the room get involved a bit more? Maybe I'll ask you, Xiang, to start.
Oh, absolutely. Um, so I got involved into ACE. I can tell a little bit of history about ACE since I'm
Great.
a co-founder. So we started off as a journal club, in other words, a paper reading club. So we started off in Toronto downtown. We were rotating different companies in downtown Toronto area. The group was founded actually by Amir, the CEO. So at beginning, it just started off a bunch of curious individuals want to read and learn about latest machine learning papers. So it has since evolved into a company, and then we've taken everything fully online. And Sean, what Sean is doing right now here is a stream. Um, it's called a careers in ML stream. But we also have I think something like 30 plus different
Yeah.
other streams focusing on different areas. So it has since kind of evolved into something a lot bigger than the original, just a simple like a reading group. Um, so yeah, that's how I became involved in the. Is that the question? I think there's another part of the question. That you
Just what value do you see for
oh.
people in the room, for instance?
Oh yeah, definitely. First of all, I can tell you straight, we offer ML. We offer a subscription service which has an MLOps component. We can talk about this, but we have I guess a specific take on MLOps, but that's just kind of one flavor of it. We can talk about philosophy, but the philosophy is that you want to get started quickly, like exactly what Fatin just said, but at the same time, you don't want to get locked into specific vendors. So how to strike that balance was an emphasis on our, I guess, ML ops course. So if you're interested in ML ops specifically, I definitely I recommend you at least you check it out. And we also have a lot of tons of free videos on YouTube. And there are a specific ML ops stream, which was I think hosted by Ali, and we have a lot of past videos. And thirdly, the other value I think to take is I forgot I was going to mention it at the beginning, but there's a friend of mine who did a talk on our YouTube channel, which is called 7 Job Profiles in Machine Learning. In the machine learning career landscape, which gives you an over. He has a very good way of articulating different roles and jobs, the boundaries and scopes of responsibility, how they differ, and how it got involved. So that is a free video that I recommend you everybody check it out. So yeah, and other than that, we have a vibrant community, and people here they got involved. They come whenever by doing workshops or by joining free events, and what we see is that they stay and they continue to contribute. So it's definitely a community that I recommend and I think it's worth checking out.
Great. And I think it's just a reminder that all this free content that we're talking about here is available on the website at ai.science. So I agree. I encourage you to check it out. Fatin, what's your take?
Yeah. So the way I got exposed to it actually was Jiang would hold these like would invite a lot of the ML people, ML community into our previous company because I was a coworker of Jiang and he was also my mentor initially, and he would invite all these ML people and I would sit in these talks and I wasn't practicing ML at that time, and I always found it fascinating and it was really cool to meet interesting people. And I was, and at the time I was trying to transition into ML. And so it was all fascinating talks, really fascinating talks. It made me feel like I was back in grad school, I guess, in many ways. But anyway, everyone was super nice there. And after I got a job in machine learning specifically, and which is my current role, I felt like I needed to keep up to date with what the latest things were going on in ML, and I didn't really have much time to be able to investigate those things. I was really busy with work and things like that, and so I found a basic, would you call it ACE?
Ace.
ACE. A really great way, like taking a workshop was really great way for me to really bridge the gap between what was going out and in our field, which is moving so fast, and being able to learn about those things. So in a nice setting, and it also exposes me to the experts, like the instructors who know a lot about this stuff, and so I can talk to them about my specific work problems too, which is really cool. And then later down the line, Amir asked me to do some TAing, because I took an MLOps course as well, a workshop. I recommend that, to taking that MLOps workshop. So, and then Amir asked me to TA, and I've been doing that ever since, I guess, the pandemic hit. I've been TAing the course.
Something that came up in one of the breakout rooms, which is simply a question of tools and technologies. And maybe the way I'll frame it up for the broader conversation is to ask my panelists, how do you choose the tools that you need for MLOps in a particular context? And just name a few of the tools that you really like the most and why. Maybe we'll start with you, Jian.
Okay. Definitely anything. I think the foundational one is definitely Docker. So it helps you containerizing your ML flows. That's a foundational one. The other thing that comes to my mind is, there's this tool called ML Flow, which helps you define and track your model, and also it has some, I think, automatic tracking built in. So those are two things that come to my mind.
Great. Fatin?
Yeah, I forgot to mention Docker. Yeah, like in the breakout room. But Docker, yes, you should know. Yeah, containerization is super important these days, and definitely pick that up. So for me, yeah, are we talking about like foundational tools, or just tools that like we've came across that help solve problems?
Maybe the latter, yeah.
Okay, so for me, like I think I mentioned the breakout room. Facebook researches Hydra. I've been recently getting into that. It's been fun to use it so far, which basically allows you to set up different configurations for your Python scripts. I've been finding it's helping me organize my code a little bit nicer, where before the thing that I was running into, an issue I was running into, is like when using Jupyter notebooks, you can oftentimes, modify things really quickly because you're really tweaking things all the time to like construct your model, and you can you can lose track of what's going on. And so I found that using Hydra was a way of like at least disciplining me in terms of setting up the configurations that I need for running a script. I've been enjoying using that so far. Another tool, I used a tool for Python called Poetry. I don't know if I recommend it yet for production. I don't know if I quite recommend it yet, but I'm going to mention it anyway because I've been
Right.
I have been using it in production, but I don't recommend it right now for production. But what's nice about that is the problem I find with Python is, unlike JavaScript, the kind of development environment with Node is that, with NPM, you get lock files, which, ensures that your dependencies, any dependencies that you're installing, any packages you're installing, and the dependencies on them, that you lock the versioning of those dependencies that those packages depend on. And so, for example, what that allows you to do is, if a let's say a hacker comes in or an attacker comes in and swaps out the dependencies for your particular packages because they hacked into the repo of that package. Then what it allows, then there's a problem where, if you install that package, you could be at risk. And so locking it kind of helps with that. I don't like, that's one kind of scenario. And so Python doesn't really have that. And one of the contenders to be able to solve that problem is Poetry, but it kind of acts like NPM with JavaScript. But I don't know if I fully recommend it yet, but it's interesting to play around with, I guess. Yeah. What else have I banged my head on? I'm trying to figure out what tools help solve it. A really cool one that I've been using with Python is if you're using AWS, there's a tool called S3FS. It's cool because it treats your S3 bucket like a file system, and you kind of have all, like, how in Python you open a file using the open function. And that opens up a file IO kind of class for you to be able to manipulate the file that you're reading in. So you can do the same thing with this tool S3FS. You treat the S3 objects as files. So I've been finding that pretty useful too. The only issue there is that there's a lot of latency between S3 and whatever machine that you're running it on, because you have to download those files if you're gonna like manipulate those files. So that's one issue with it, but that's been pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. This might be a bit of a silly question, but when we're talking about tools, I think for those of us who are just starting out in ML, one of the things that we struggle with is the amount of time it takes to train the model. And I'm just curious to know, is there anything that can help with that beyond computational power?
You want to take that, Zhang?
Sure. If we go into the specific training things, like so parallelizing it works to some extent, like, but also is quite expensive. Doing larger batch sizes definitely reduce training time, but at the same time, your accuracy suffers. But there are specific ways, I think it's called scheduled learning rate or something, to help alleviate that, so you could potentially train with very large batch sizes while still maintaining the desirable accuracy. So that's probably on the algorithm side. Other than that, if I assume we're talking about in the deep learning context. Other than that, I can't really think of anything. Here's the other one, and you make sure that you are actually using your GPU efficiently. A lot of times, what we find, what we often observe on the during the training is that if you use a tool to monitor the GPU usage, it's actually not 100%, or actually it's not anywhere near to saturation. That is an indication that your bottleneck is probably somewhere else. Oftentimes it is from the data pre-processing or the batch loading phase. So there are two things at play here. One is like you have a constant loop that keeps training, and while at the same time you have to keep getting the data in and prepare for the next batch. So a lot of times, like, people, like, if you don't do a close monitoring of those metrics, you probably wouldn't even realize that, okay, the bottleneck is actually not a GPU. It's actually you're doing this very intensive data pre-processing work. Like, say, if we're talking about like the computer vision training task, augmentation is a very common thing to do, but augmentation takes a lot of CPU resources. If you're augmenting like 256 data points at one time, that's a lot of CPU power you need to take. So is your algorithm, there are different ways of alleviating that. Maybe use a computer with more CPUs, or change your algorithm so that you can parallelize it more efficiently. But just make sure you're actually taking advantage of the CPU. And also, other than that, increase to the batch size to the point where it's almost occupying all your GPU memory. but not too much. And also, if the batch size is too large, then you use some special different techniques to do it. So it's a lot of, I guess, tricks, and some of them may not necessarily fall into the MLOps the scope. So I think going back to the Venn diagram I was talking about, that is why I think that as an MLOps engineer, you definitely need to know a little bit about machine learning and the basics and foundation of machine learning, so that even later in the team environment, maybe it's not your scope of responsibility, but you could still help diagnose and figure out a problem quickly.
Yeah, great, thanks. That makes sense. I want to go maybe from training models to training people. And this is something that's come up a little bit in our conversation so far. We've certainly talked about the MLOps training that people can get through ACE. And I'm just curious to see if you guys recommend any other resources or any other approaches to learning about MLOps.
So yeah, so in the breakout, I also recommended this course called Deployment of Machine Learning Models on Udemy. You can look into that. And then in terms of MLOps, I like yeah, I touched some of this in the breakout room, but in order to learn MLOps. Wait, the question was learning about MLOps, or was it also the resources? Or was it
what resources or what approaches even to use to learn MLOps?
Right. So I think good solid software engineering practices are really important. And by knowing that, it'll help you figure out what a good ML practice is. And so I recommend learning that. So what are good software engineering practices? You know, it's like, you know, unit testing, automated testing, like learning the basics of good coding, right? Like how to separate out your code and make it readable. Those are also applicable to ML for sure. How to deploy software, like if you had to deploy an application, that's really important. And how you would learn all that? Well, I recommend highly just to do it, right? So get a model, train a model first, like even if it's all manual and even if your model's not great, that doesn't matter. Just train a model, figure out how to do that, and then figure out how to get that model onto the cloud, right? Whether it be AWS, Heroku, GitHub, whatever it may be. And then start to piece together what your pain points are, right? Was it hard? Like what manual step was so labor intensive for you to do? And how can I automate it? You know, if you train a new model and you deploy it, like, is it easy to do? What's not easy about doing that process? Is when you train a model, does it break when you get it deployed? And then how would you go about fixing it? And would you go about preventing it? Do you have to write a bunch of tests to do it? So that practice is what is going to develop those skills. In MLOps, and more so than any resources, because the resources will come when you start Googling the problems, right? When you encounter these problems and you want to figure out how to solve them, you'll end up Googling, you'll end up talking to other people, and that's how you pick up these skills, right? And learning the tools that you need. The other portion of MLOps that really doesn't get emphasized, and this applies to anything technical these days too, is just having good soft skills, right? How do you communicate? Like, the truth is, a lot of models in companies don't get ever deployed, right? A lot of them won't ever get into production and ever be used. And part of that has to do with educating, leaders and managers why, where ML can add value and how it adds value to the company, right? And how you can add that value quickly enough. And so it really is important to be able to communicate those ideas and communicate what you're doing and why it's important. So developing those basic soft skills is important. So So I'll give you an example. If you are going to work on an ML ops project, you know, if you deploy something and then you you start to figure out how to optimize things, it's one cool thing to do is maybe, you know, write a blog post of how you improved things, how you deployed it, how you improved things, why you improved it in such a way, like like write a process of how you did it all, right? Or write a report, and then that will teach you, you know, it'll develop those communication skills that you
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I don't know if there is any one answer for this question, but one of the things I'm imagining, say you're a startup or you're a company that's doing ML models for the first time, or really, really just starting out and really doesn't have ML ops in place. What's the first thing that they should do?
Jiang, you are the CTO of a startup, so
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Is the question is if you just want to get started, like on a practical setting, if you just want to get started with ML ops
Where to begin?
for your organization?
Yeah.
Okay, it comes back to Fatin's point, which I guess I'll kind of rephrase the same thing, like start simple. It comes if so there's the field called system thinking that that there are different ways of like how to deal with the very complex systems. So one principle that really kind of stuck with me, which is any complex systems evolves from something much simpler, like a simple system. Um, in so it also depends on the knowledge of the team. So there are two things at play here. Like one is by default, if you're just getting started and your business do not have a lot of resources or knowledge, I would say, like just like I said in the chat room, start something super simple. Sort number one, get out of the Jupyter notebook, have some independent Python script that can run. Number two, front it with a Flask server. Then you have the very basic. And number three, maybe containerize it. You learn little things along the way. In terms of by another school of thought is okay, you probably need to have a basic pipeline structure in place in order to do it. I would say only do that if you know what you're doing. So if you have prior experience, you have done this whole thing again, you can go a couple of steps ahead. Like I think it's acceptable to do a couple of steps ahead to set up the infrastructure. Yes, that will save you time. But if it's just because someone else tell you to do it, because maybe they have their own agenda, maybe they tell you to do this, I would say by default, you don't have to do it. You can just start simple and later add on refactor or code, refactor or pipeline, and gradually go into a more complex setup. And so it depends on the need of what do you need next. So maybe in your domain, model versioning is more important. So you want to keep track of the models, then you use different tools like ML Flow to take care of that area. Maybe scalability is important because you have a lot of users waiting for this model to be served. Then you probably would care more about serving, in other words, serving model at inference time. So I think that's how I would start at a company if you just want to start this like from scratch.
Okay, great. That makes sense.
By the way, sorry.
Go on. No, please go on.
So I mean, so going the other way, like if you're working in a larger company, right? Maybe the company has a DevOps team, right? And maybe there's other resources available. You know, you start at that point. You start really need to focusing on the communication part. I think that becomes more important. The reason why I say that is because in my current company, we're very highly optimized to be able to, like, our DevOps is really good at getting our mobile app and like our web app out into production, out in the real world to serve millions of customers. But what we don't know much about is how to do that with models, right? And that has been something where you do need to communicate a lot with the DevOps team, the security team and things like that to be able to figure out what the best solution is, right? And so I think that's also another layer if you're going to work in a if you're trying to do that at a larger company.
I'll just wrap things up with a quick question for you guys. If you can maybe, if there's one interesting tool that you haven't brought up tonight that you'd like to mention, or one parting piece of advice that you want to give, what would that be? We'll start with you, Fatim.
The advice I give is keep in mind that most of you, I mean, most companies, especially in Canada too, have an issue with getting machine learning is this shiny thing, and they don't, but then, and they'll go on and hire people and hire a team to do this shiny thing, but then they don't know exactly what to do with it and how to, they have no idea visibility in terms of a business standpoint, what what problems they can actually solve. And so I think it's really critical to think of MLOps not just as learning all these tools, but actually being able to communicate and figuring out what business value or what value you can add using machine learning and using MLOps. And it's not because most models are going to die, they're never going to actually make it to production, but your chances will certainly increase if you know how to communicate that to your managers and leaders. So yeah, I really highly emphasize those soft skills in developing good MLOps skills.
Great point. Jiang?
Okay, I guess I have two things. One is as my friend, his name's Xing Wang, and the person, he was a data science lead at Geico. For those who know, Geico is an American, one of the big American insurance company. He this video, I highly recommend you check it out. He mentioned that I don't know the job landscape as well as he did, but he mentioned that ML ops is actually a highly sought after kind of job, a career, position in a lot of these organizations. So if you do things right, consistently practice ML ops skills, that includes DevOps and basics of machine learning, and the combination of the two, which is more important. I think it's probably a good route to go after, but the key is this is a very practical thing. And as with the economic situation right now, I know some of you are looking for jobs. With economic situation these days, while what company look in these environments, what company look for is more focusing on the practical, I would say, in general. So keep building up your portfolio, keep practicing, and keep doing the practical, and doing hands-on things is probably could increase your chance of getting a job. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The other thing is I want to do a plug on our Stream Owner application for Stream Owner. It's a part that we're not doing a very good job at advertising it, but right now we have around 30 streams. If you want to specialize in a particular field, or if you already have some good knowledge, exposure to a certain field, feel free to apply for a stream owner. Like Sean himself is a stream owner in ML in careers. And the benefit is that, I guess the pitch, elevator pitch is such that you see those like independent YouTube channels, like people interviewing other people. And we sort of provide you with a process and framework under, I guess, the ACE community brand to become a sort of YouTube host yourself, if that makes sense. And then you get to connect it with a lot of like pioneers or prominent people in the field, and at the same time, you yourself get exposure to a lot of people as well. So I guess if you, because maintaining your own YouTube channel is a lot of work. So we provide you with a logistic framework and a lot of things for you to kind of just come in and follow a process and give you some tools to schedule, book meetings, and do all that. So that's an aspect we don't really advertise quite a lot, but I think we should be more advertised.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I wanted to mention a couple of quick things before we wrap up, since we're talking about careers and career moves and stream ownership. One thing, if you look in the chat, you'll see that Amir has made a point to mention that ACE actually offers some free career counseling with several of the senior people in the organization. There's some links there where you can actually book the time if you would like. And since conversation has come up about the capstones a fair bit, one thing I wanted to point out is that at the AI.science website, one of the navigation items is featured items. And if you click on there, you can go to the past capstone section. So you can see videos of some of the different products that have been built during those capstones, just to give you a sense of what's possible. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. I know there are a lot of different things that you can do on Tuesday night, and I appreciate that you're here. I want to thank both of our panelists very much. I think that you've given a really wise overview to everybody. So I hope that you will come to other events in the ML Careers in ML stream and learn about other events either on our website, AI.science, or adding us on LinkedIn, or going to YouTube and signing up for our ML Papers Explained series. So thank you everyone so much, and we will see you soon.